Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about a really interesting development in the trade war between the USA and China that is potentially going to affect the whole of the global economy in the rest of 2025. Now, you might be sitting there quite rightly thinking, hang on a minute, Joe. I thought the trade war had been put to bed. The trade war's off the table because the 145% tariff that Donald Trump had threatened against China has now been reduced back to 30%. And China has completely waived its 125% tariff that it was threatening to charge the USA. And you'd be right in that assumption. However, what we've seen is something else now coming to light because China controls the vast majority, more than 90% of rare earth minerals. And it's not just rare earth minerals, which you may or may not understand. I've talked about them a lot over the last few weeks, and I don't think any of us really know the details unless you're a chemist as to what those rare earth minerals do and what they can be used for in terms of practical applications. But one of the practical applications is that they're used to create magnets. And those magnets are used in a variety of different industries. But the one that is complaining the most at the moment is the automotive industry because they've now run out of these magnets. And potentially, this could mean that car production all around the world could come to a grinding halt. So it's one thing to agree the tariffs that you're going to charge on Chinese imports, but it's a completely different matter if one of your industries is completely halted because they can't get a critical component. Now, in terms of what a rare earth magnet is, I thought it was worth having a look because I'm pretty sure that none of us really understand what rare earth magnets are. Now, I don't know how to pronounce any of these words, but I'm going to have a go. So neodymium, no, neodymium. I don't know how to pronounce that, but maybe you do. Write me a message if you're a chemical expert, and you can do. But anyway, this sort of chemical is used in to produce a rare earth magnet. And the reason why it's important is because these magnets are the strongest known to man. They are basically permanent magnets because a normal magnet that you might have used in the past, if you remember, we all had those magnets that were U shaped, that looked like a horseshoe with it was red with a silver tip on the end, and you could, the classical magnet you'd see in a cartoon. Those magnets lose their potency over time, so they become weaker. So over time, they become less effective. And obviously, if you're putting magnets into something where it's a critical part of the components of that vehicle, for example, you don't want it to suddenly fail, to all of the systems in the car to stop working because the magnet has lost its potency. So that's why the automotive sector is using rare earth magnets because they're basically permanent. They last forever. And also, they're much stronger and they're also smaller. So, all of those things are highly attractive if you're making a car because you can use it and it's lighter, it will last forever, and it's very small. So, if we have a look at where rare earth magnets differ to standard magnets, I've just talked about magnetic strength, extremely strong, best power to size ratio out of every magnet. Normal magnets, moderate to low. Size and weight, they are much smaller and lighter for the same strength of magnet, whereas a standard magnet would be larger and heavier, which you don't want if you're making a car or an aeroplane or something like that. In terms of efficiency, very high for a rare earth magnet, much lower for standard magnets. Temperature resistance is better for rare earth magnets. Durability, you can, well, in basic form, it's the same as a standard magnet. However, you can coat it to make it stronger to protect it. It's much more expensive to produce a rare earth magnet, but in certain sectors like the automotive, aerospace, defense, it's worth paying that extra cost for all of these additional benefits that we've just talked about. In terms of corrosion, they have a better resistance to corrosion. But the problem, as you can see down the bottom here, is that the availability is limited. Now, in terms of mining rare earth metals, around 69% of the global supply is mined in China. So that means that we've still got, roughly 31% in the rest of the world. But then you have to actually go through a production process, and 90% of the production process is in China. So I've had a lot of messages from people over the last few weeks saying, it doesn't matter that China is going to withhold the supply of rare earth minerals because we've got lots in the USA and Canada and various other places. We can just mine our own and we don't need China. But unfortunately, if you start an industry from scratch, if you don't have all of the production already in place, then what that means is that you're going to have a gap. If you suddenly stop sourcing it from the world's largest supplier, China, and make it yourself, that's fine as long as you're ready to go. But if you're not ready to go, then the automotive industry is going to have to wait for you to produce those magnets. And that could take years. And obviously, automotive manufacturers can't wait years for a critical component because that means that they would have to stop producing cars and they would go out of business by the time you'd started making those magnets. So, in summary, rare earth magnets are smaller and lighter, they're more efficient, and they are highly responsive, making them perfect for precise moving, braking, steering, and acceleration. Now, if we have a look at what rare earth magnets are used for in cars, they're used in a variety of applications, unfortunately, for the car manufacturers, including the electric motor, power steering, braking, electric windows, seats, wipers, speakers, and infotainment. And if we go through the details and we have a look at a bit more information here, you can see that electric motors, the high power permanent magnets are used for efficient torque and acceleration, power steering systems, electrical motor assistance is needed for steering control. In braking systems, high efficient magnets are used in motors and generators. Air conditioning, magnet based motors are used for energy efficient operation. Fuel pumps, magnets are used for consistent fuel delivery. Sensors and actuators, there's various types of precision electronic control needed. Speakers, lightweight, high performance magnets are used for audio. Windshield wiper motors, they're used in that. Electric seat motors and transition systems. So, what we're seeing here is that these magnets are used right across the car. You can't just say, oh, well, we'll build the car without seats or electric motors or power steering or air conditioning or fuel pumps because the car wouldn't operate. You'd be going back 50 years in terms of how you've been making those vehicles. Nobody wants to buy them. And this is why it's now causing a major problem. And on May the 9th, a consortium of companies from the automotive sector sent a letter to Donald Trump, and included in that consortium was General Motors in the USA, Toyota in Japan, Volkswagen, which is a German company, and Hyundai, and a variety of other suppliers. Because if you know the automotive sector, you'll know that the main brands don't operate in isolation. They have thousands of different component companies that are supplying them with all the different pieces that they use and they assemble then to make the finished vehicle. So we've got thousands of different companies all across the world. This isn't just restricted to the USA. They wrote to Donald Trump and said, if you continue with this tariff policy and the trade war with China, there is a real risk that we could run out of the supply of these rare earth metals and magnets. And if we do, then we won't be able to continue with the production of vehicles. Our companies are at risk if we lose these supplies. And the letter itself had a variety of different concerns, and we'll go through the key issues here that were raised in that letter. The first was the critical shortage of rare earth magnets, which, as we've just discussed, are used in a variety of different applications. Basically, they're used all across the car. And the disruption, it said, was threatening production of both electric and internal combustion vehicles. So basically, it will stop all the production lines for all of these companies. The second concern that was raised was the over reliance on China, as I mentioned earlier in the video. They control over 90% of global rare earth magnet processing. And the problem that the industry faces is that there are also license restrictions here. So China holds the control, but also if somebody else wants to start making them, then they need a license from these Chinese businesses. And obviously, that's another concern that if you don't get the license, then you can't use it, you can't make it yourself. The specific risk to US manufacturing was raised in that letter, saying that without immediate solutions, automakers were warning of reduced vehicle production, potential shutdown of assembly lines, and broader supply chain instability. And they were calling on the US government to take action to engage diplomatically with China, accelerate efforts to diversify and secure domestic or allied supply chains and avoid further policy delays as companies struggle to maintain operations. That was the automotive industry, but actually, this issue is also affecting other industries. And you can see here that the defense industry and the green energy wind turbines are also highly reliant on these rare earth magnets. So the automotive sector has been the first to put its hand up and say, we've got a problem because we've run short of magnets. We don't think we can continue with our production. But actually, this could affect the defense industry. And the defense industry is obviously really big news at the moment because of the war in Ukraine and a lot of other instability we've got around the world. Donald Trump is encouraging most of the West to increase their investment into defense. He wants to see an increase to 5% of GDP. Most countries are well short of that, maybe 1.5%, 2%. So there would be a huge ramping up here in terms of investment into defense, which would need more of these magnets. And obviously, if China's controlling the global supply, that will cause a problem because you won't actually be able to build any of the defense equipment. So, what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because we've been talking a lot about the trade war between the USA and China, and we've been focusing in predominantly on the tariffs, the amount that is going to be added to all of the imports by each country. And that will obviously increase prices and will reduce the volume of sales and will reduce profitability for companies in the other country. So, that's basically a pure economic issue. We can just talk about price and supply and demand. But what we're talking about in today's video is a different type of trade war. China holds the global supply of rare earth minerals, but more importantly, the magnets that are produced using those minerals. And I don't think many of us thought about magnets being a major issue for a trade war. In fact, magnets aren't something that I've thought about since I was a kid. It's a plaything, it was a fun thing to do. And maybe you see a fridge magnet, you go and stick a place that you've been to on your fridge and have a look at the magnet on the back. But other than that, I don't really think about magnets. And I certainly didn't think about magnets being a critical part of an automotive vehicle. I didn't think that magnets were used in so many different applications. And the reason why these rare earth magnets are being used is because they are significantly better than a standard magnet. They're smaller, they're more efficient, and they're also permanent. So they will be magnetic for the whole life of that vehicle. So that means that everything in the vehicle will work for the expected lifetime. You can buy a car, and in 30 years' time, everything will still be working, broadly speaking, because those magnets are still magnetic. But if you can't get those magnets, if China suddenly says, actually, we don't really like the way this trade negotiation is going between the USA and ourselves, so we're going to sit on our magnets for a while. And actually, because we control 90% plus of the global supply, we think everybody might want to come back and talk to us about a different deal. And interestingly, Donald Trump is now saying that he needs to accelerate the industry in the USA. He needs to change some laws to allow more development of rare earth minerals. But that's not going to happen overnight. That's not going to help the automotive sector or the defense sector in the next 6 months or the next 12 months. It's simply not possible to ramp up the mining and then go into production and get it ready. That's going to take years. So China is in a very strong position here, and it's playing a very smart game because by withholding these magnets, it's increasing its negotiating power in the trade deal with the USA. So Donald Trump has been very aggressive so far in terms of slapping tariffs on all countries in the world and increasing the cost of the imports into the USA because there is a big trade deficit. But I think what we're seeing here is a slightly more interesting approach by the Chinese. They know that these magnets are critical to many industries. It's not just the automotive and the defense industries. There will be thousands, if not millions, of applications that these sort of magnets are used in. And everybody is now concerned that they won't be able to get hold of the magnets, that therefore they won't be able to continue with their normal business. And it will be really interesting to see what happens over the course of the next few weeks because the automotive sector is already panicking, and we could see panic spreading across a variety of other industries if China keeps its firm grip on the control of these magnets. And it will be interesting to see what happens with Donald Trump and how he responds, because his usual response is to go on the offensive, to come up with something quite aggressive. So we may see the 100% plus tariffs being reinstated against China. If we do, China's likely to retaliate. That's going to be bad news for both of those economies. They are the two biggest economies in the world by far. So it will be bad news for the global economy. So what we're seeing here is that a magnet, a very small magnet, which goes into really small applications, could actually have a massive impact on the global economy in 2025. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end. I know it's only my loyal fans who watch all the way through to the end, so thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for your support. If you've sent me a YouTube super thanks or bought me a coffee, really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And if you're a long-term supporter, and I've been getting some new long-term supporters recently, so thanks for anyone who's signed up, but also thank you so much for anyone who's been there since the start. Your support really helps me, either through Patreon, YouTube membership, or Buy Me a Coffee membership. Really helps keep me motivated and making more videos. And here's something to put a smile on your face.